So let's continue by having a look at the sketch that is running right now on my ESP32 that provides me with a service that contains two characteristics. Alright, so we start by including the necessary libraries. We've got the BLE device, on top of it we've got BLE utils and the BLE server, since this is what we are trying to build. Now below that, I need to define the UUIDs for the service and then for the two characteristics that this service contains. These UUIDs are essentially randomly generated, but because they are large, 128 bits each, there is a very, very good chance that it is unique and that there is no other service or characteristic or device on the planet that has the same UUID. I generated those UUIDs via this online tool. Just go to this location, uuidgenerator.net, just refresh the page, and each time you refresh the page, you get a new UUID. You just simply copy that into my sketch, and I get 3 of those. So I end up with 3 unique UUIDs. So now that I've got the UUIDs, I'm going to skip those bits and go to the setup function. In the setup function, I use the init function of the BLE device class to create the new device handle. And I give it a name, my ESP32, and that can be arbitrary. So this is a name that appears here in my scanner, my ESP32. That's how I can identify my BLE device running on the ESP32 among a lot of other devices with their own different names. So you can put your name here if you like. Then I create a server, a BLE server, and this is the pointer to the handle of that server. Below that, I create a service. There you go, the service. You can have multiple services as you like. In this example, I only have one service. I do that by calling the create service function on the server. And then I want to create 2 characteristics that are part of this service. So I use the create characteristic function that is part of the pService object, and I pass a bunch of parameters which are the UUID for the service that I want to create, and then the properties that the service has. So I'm going to be able to read and write to this characteristic. And that's why here you can see that we've got a read and write capabilities on this characteristic. And later on, I'm going to make some changes to the existing value by actually writing to the characteristic. I'll do that in a minute. I do the exact same thing for the second characteristic. So I've got a different pointer, it's characteristic 2, and then I create it in the same way. Create characteristic, pass the unique identifier, the UUID, and it also has the same properties for read and write. Then, because we are creating a server here, we want this server to be able to react to a client changing the values of the characteristics. And this happens via callbacks. So here in line 115, I create the first callback for the first characteristic. And then here in line 119, I create a callback for the second characteristic. So a callback is code that I've written up here, included up here. It's just an embedded class. I give it an arbitrary name as long as what I've got highlighted here matches the name that you declared in the callbacks line down here. This is going to work. But then what is inside the callback embedded class, this specific. So we have the on-write function or handler, and then the on-read, which I haven't got here because I don't have a handler for on-read. I'm only interested to do something when the client is trying to make a change to the value of the characteristic. So that change is an on-write event that will be handled by this code. And what this code does is to first get the value of the characteristic, the new value of the characteristic that the client has just typed in or entered, and then to print it out to the serial monitor. And you probably remember what is happening here from the previous lecture with the classic Bluetooth. The get value function will store the value that the client has written to this characteristic in an array of bytes. And then to print it out to the serial monitor, I need to take these bytes one at a time and send it out to the serial monitor. So here's the array, and then with the square brackets, I can access and retrieve the value of each one of the cells in this array and then send it out to the serial monitor. And I'm doing the exact same thing here for the second callback. So once I set the callbacks, I can continue by writing at the default or the first value to the two characteristics. So hello world car1 and hello world car2, and that's what you see right here. Here's the first value for the first characteristic and the first value for the second characteristic. And I'm about to actually change those in a minute. So once we have the two characteristics set, we can start the service of which the two characteristics are part of. And to make this BLE service discoverable by a client, we need to start the advertising process. So we create an advertising handle, and then we start advertising. So now my ESP32 is starting to advertise, which means to broadcast to its environment that it's ready to receive a connection, or it's ready to connect with a client. That's all there is. We don't have anything in the loop because nothing is really happening in the loop. Everything is happening through these event handlers and the callbacks. So I'm going to bring up a serial monitor, and I'm connected to my ESP32 via the USB interface. And what I'll do next, I'll leave that here so you can get a better view. What I'll do next is I'm going to change the values that the two characteristics currently contain. So let's write a new value. I'm going to make that a text value and make it something simple like this, hello, and write that. All right, and you can see that in the serial monitor, the value hello also appeared. And then what you see here is the value hello in hexadecimal. Let's try one more thing. I'm going to write a value, but this time it's going to be a hexadecimal value instead of a text value. So let's say I want to send out a capital A. So capital A is here in the ASCII table, and its hexadecimal code is 41. So when I type in 41 and see what happens. Right. Okay, so you can see that here is the new value, 41. Read value 41, so that is the latest value that I typed in, and the other ones here are historical previous values. And if I go back one level, you can see that A also appears here in the value of this characteristic. So I'll do the same thing for the second one. So write value, can you write say hexadecimal 41, and I'm also going to send another hex value for B, which is 42, and see what happens. Okay, so here is 41 and 42, and I'm going to read it, and there's 41, 42, and I should probably not have, here it goes, it is transmitted properly, it's recorded properly. Two hexadecimal values, when turned into text, they are A, B, correctly shown here. All right. So this was an example of a simple implementation of a BLE server using custom characteristics instead of predefined by the Bluetooth consortium characteristics. In the next lecture, what we'll do is I'm going to connect the LCD screen to my ESP32 so that the values of the characteristics are displayed on the LCD screen instead of having to use my computer and the serial monitor and the USB connection to do so. In addition, in the next lecture, I will have the ESP32 powered by a battery so that it's not connected or tethered to my computer. But let's check it out.